Hello BookTube, I'm Peg. Welcome back to my channel where I have started a 64 book reading plan. I have five months to do it, but just in case if you haven't seen my explanation before, it's part of a new, what they call the Mookse Madness tournament. It's a play on the basketball madness in March and other things now, where we're going to start with 64 books and narrow them down with voting in March. And the Mookse, Trevor, has put up a new, just yesterday, put up a new tweet about it and his blog post that explains it. So I put a link to that below, and he wants to emphasize, I'm sure, that you do not have to read all the books to take part in the voting. In fact, probably even I, who have all day every day to read, I'm not sure I'll get them all done, but I'm going to give it a hard try anyway. So I'm delighted to see some of the comments from viewers here on my channel, and that you've joined the forum for Mookse Madness on Goodreads, and hearing how you're planning to go about your reading and what books you've been able to find. And it's interesting, different plans that people have for reading, all great, because really it's the idea to get to talking about these older books by Booker-winning authors. And some people are like picking out authors they especially like and trying to read all 4 books. There's 4 books by all of 16 Booker-winning authors. Not necessarily the book that won the Booker. Anyway, so some people are picking out certain authors they really like and trying to read all 4 of them. Some people are trying to read maybe one by each author, and there will be places to vote when the votes come up, no matter what you've read, when what you've read comes up in the vote. So he explains how he's going to do the voting also. So I'm really looking forward to this whole thing, and I'm having so much fun reading. I find that I'm really reading better and closer, and just by doing this. This is the 8th book I've read now. I read 4 the first week and 4 this week. And I'm using my 25-point rating plan, which I've talked about before. Roughly it's 5 points each for plot, character, setting, writing quality, and my enjoyment. So that adds up to 25 for the perfect book. And that I'm not going to talk about what I've rated them on here, any of them, because I don't want to prejudice you against or for certain books. I want everybody to read all you can, and when the voting comes, I'll show by voting which ones I've preferred. So anyway, the other good thing about it is they're all English authors, because Americans didn't take part in the Booker until the last few years, and these authors have all been shortlisted at least 3 times for the Booker. So there's not a bad book among them, really, even though some of their earlier works may not be as good, but I've really enjoyed it. My plan has been to start with the first book from each author. He's got them on the list you can click on below. He's got them arranged so the first book is the earliest they wrote. So I have 4 works today I'm anxious to talk about that are the earlier works. In fact, the first 2 I'm going to talk about were both published in the 1950s, and one of them shows its age, but in a good way. It's still a good read, and the other doesn't. So let me start with these and show you how I think they differ in their age. Okay, the first one is by Brian Moore, who's an author I really probably hadn't really heard of, though I had heard of this book. And this one was one of his first ones, I think, published in 1955. Incidentally, Brian Moore is Irish, grew up in Ireland, but during the war, he, I guess, changed some ideas, and he ended up moving to Canada. So he's kind of halfway called a Canadian author now. But this book is very Irish, about Belfast, takes place in Belfast. Now, the title now is called The Lonely Passion of Judith Hearne. It was first published as the book Just Judith Hearne, And then there was a movie made it where they talked about the lonely passion, and it went so well that they changed the name of the book to make it more, I guess, striking. Anyway, this book takes place is about a woman unmarried woman of a certain age, spinsterish, that lives in a boarding house. Now, I love English boarding house novels. It seems a lot of them are set there, and you've got your characters already formed to interact. Some of Barbara Pym's, if I remember right, were set in boarding houses about women of a certain age. Anyway, so this is the eponymous Judith Hearne, that she's in her 40s and has had kind of a, well, it's I guess middle class, but not very financially successful life. She never has had a real job. She took care of an aged aunt most of her 20s and 30s, and is not beautiful or rich, and seems to have missed out on any of the normal things that would happen, such as marriage, etc. But her aunt has finally died that she took care of, so she moves to this boarding house when it starts out. Now, the characters are wonderful. The characters that are there in the boarding house, it's just so well done. And the main thrust of it, there's a man there that she decides she's going to marry. The reader sees things quite differently from how she sees things, but the main thing I think is portraying is she is actually an alcoholic. She is stopped there at the first, and you're not really unsure what her life was. She refers to a problem, but at her old boarding house, but doesn't really say what it is. And as the book goes on, it just shows the throes she goes to with her alcoholism. I just want to cringe when she gets drunk and does these foolish things and has to wake up in the morning to the boarding house people looking at her like, And it is very realistic done. I have a feeling this might be one of the first books where they show an addiction, such as alcoholism, not as something that's morally wrong, but it is actually, I guess you would say, an illness or an addiction. And you just feel sorry for her for the whole time, and the more foolish she acts, and her life just falls apart. And it's aged, because I think now you wouldn't see that. We know quite a bit, or think we do, about addiction and addiction treatment. I mean, today you'd say get her in rehab, but anyway, it's interesting how it plays out, and I think very indicative of its time, how it would have been handled back then. Okay, the next one I have, also published in the 50s, 1958, is called The Bell by Iris Murdoch. Now, Curtis of Books and Books was just talking about Iris Murdoch yesterday on that he had read, and I was glad to hear that. And I made the comment to him that I was kind of dreading, in a way, reading this, because I've tried Iris Murdoch before, and it seems like she just kind of sets up all these quirky characters that don't seem quite realistic, who just spend the whole book hopping in and out of bed with one another with no reason, or anyway. And it kind of got a little old, I thought. But, I don't know if I'm developing as a reader and reading more deeply or more thoughtfully, especially since I'm trying to think of how the plot is developed and the characters and all the things I'm judging it on as I read. It really has made me read, I think, more thoughtfully, I guess you'd say. Anyway, and this one of her very early books, called The Bell, I really loved it. It didn't seem, I was able to see there was a lot of different characters, some minor, and she just did a great job of making them all complex and three-dimensional. The basic story, The Bell, it takes place out in the country somewhere where there's an abbey, active abbey of nuns, and there's also a big house nearby where people go for, I guess you would say, religious retreats, and there's some people that just stay there. And it's the story of the interaction between all the people that come and go and there. And the bell refers to a huge bell that they've ordered that should be coming at any time. Everybody's all wrapped up in the big party they're going to have for the new bell. Anyway, so it's actually through the main narrator is a woman who comes there to be with her husband, who she had formerly left, and they're not real happy, and she does a little bit of bed hopping. But I want to say that I think this was ahead of its time. It was published in 1950, and there were some homosexual allusions and part of the story that were so contemporarily done. Maybe England was way ahead of the U.S., but there was no opprobrium towards the relationships, and it went deep into the minds of the characters as they were coming out, and really seemed like it could have been in contemporary times. So I thought, and also the setting, I'm a sucker for setting. The setting of these places, it was out in the kind of, there was woods around it and a pond, and the people, some of the action took place there, and the setting made it very realistic to me also. So I'll give a clue, got a 5 on that, and on characters. So this got a pretty high rating on my 25-point rating system. Okay, next we have The Remains of the Day, which people have probably heard of. It was the first novel by Ishiguro, who is still writing, and the sun is doing funny things. I don't know if you can even see me. It seems to be on part of me. Oh well, just listen. Okay, this one, oh, by the way, the reason I love all the books on this list is that they all take place in England. I am such an Anglophile. I've mentioned that before. I love anything English, and this is your wonderful, right out of Downton Abbey, though it was written way before Downton Abbey was popular. It deals with a man who's a butler in what used to be a lord's mansion, whatever you call the big country houses in the country, and his life as a butler, which has been his whole life. And he tells a story on it. He's taking a trip to go find a housekeeper who used to work with him. And the thing is, he's your quintessential unreliable character. Now, unreliable characters you think of usually as telling things not truthfully, but in his case, he's telling you stuff that I think he really believes, and the reader is going, no, that's not what's happened. The reader can see the difference. For instance, this housekeeper who left 20 years ago was in love with him, and anybody could see that, but he's such a serious butler that, I mean, he didn't even realize it, though. I mean, he liked the woman, but he's just now, I think, realizing. Anyway, so it's a long story. They want to hire her back. She supposedly, her marriage is split up, so he takes this long trip to go find her. And on the trip, he meets all kind of people and rethinks his life, you might say. One of the funny things is he always worked for this Lord Darling. It's that was the name of the home even, and real high people came there, and there was a lot of social activity. And as I guess with many, the house had been sold to an American. Now he works for this American guy, and it's so funny. The way that Americans treat the butlers, I mean, it's not bad. He doesn't have a problem, but the guy, the American tries to joke with the butler, and the butler doesn't get what's going on. And it's a little, I think, great allusion to how Americans face this. Anyway, so this actually was a movie, and I understand the movie is very close to the book. So this was an excellent book, but I understand his next book, which I've already got, I will be reading, called The Unconsoled, is much, much different than this. And he said he was glad this one did well and was popular because the next one he did he wrote exactly what he wanted. And well, actually, I've tried a little bit. It's kind of weird, but interesting. Okay, and last this week, oh, this is getting so long. I read the first book by Ali Smith, who of course is the one of these that's still writing, popular, should have something out, one of her new season quartets, spring I guess, should be coming out here pretty soon. Anyway, just quickly, this was called Hotel World, takes place in a hotel. It was published in 2001, which was some time ago actually. And she was just amazing in, like, just like she does now. She has these 5 characters, all women, who are around and work in a hotel or stay there or something. And let me just tell you, the one character is a chambermaid there who falls to her death in a, what do you call the chutes that they send the dumbwaiter up in? Anyway, the freak accident. She falls to her death, but she's still one of the characters because her spirit is around the hotel, and takes, you hear it. There's 4 different others, and it's kind of stream of conscious written. So it's one of those that I love. You have to kind of puzzle out exactly what's happening. But once you do that, I had to read it 2 times. The way she plays off these characters against each other, and you find out what's really happening, is wonderful. I can't believe this is so long. Probably nobody's still watching. Okay, I've got 4 books to pick out, 4 more authors for next week. So see you later. Bye.